It was 10:47 a.m. in Tokyo when the first body fell. By 10:49, there was no one left to see the skyline. Across the world, in every city, village, jungle, and desert, life simply stopped. No struggle, no warning. Just silence. One breath. That's all it took. A single inhale of an airborne pathogen so potent, so perfect in its lethality, that within seconds it shut down the human heart. Not a soul survived. Not even time to scream. Now, the world continues without us. This is not a story of survival. There are no last-minute heroes, no bunkers, no vaccine. This is a what-if scenario where every single human being on Earth dies in an instant. From an invisible airborne agent that causes fatal cardiac arrest in seconds. What would that moment look like? What systems would collapse first? What would Earth become in our absence? And is something like this even scientifically possible? In this video, we'll walk through the terrifying chain reaction of a world-ending biological event. One that doesn't unfold over days or weeks, but over minutes. This is the story of humanity's final breath. Let's begin at the origin, the release point of the silent killer, and the final moments before global extinction begins. It started with a cough, not one that anyone noticed. Just a casual clearing of the throat from a man waiting for his luggage at a major international airport. Cameras caught him shifting uncomfortably, rubbing his chest. No one around him paid attention. Why would they? People cough all the time. What they didn't know was that his heart had already stopped beating. The man collapsed, face first, into the floor. Security approached, thinking he had fainted. By the time they reached him, two others nearby had also dropped, simultaneously and without a sound. A child standing nearby stared at her mother, who suddenly slumped forward like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Within 90 seconds, everyone in the terminal was dead. Outside, planes were still landing. People were still laughing at restaurants, filming TikToks, buying coffee, planning meetings. But it had already begun. The pathogen had no name. No warning, it had no scent, no taste, and no incubation period. It was designed, or perhaps evolved, with only one objective: instant extinction. Airborne and hyperdense, the particles hung in the atmosphere like invisible fog. Traveling on wind currents, attaching to air conditioning systems, vent shafts, and the breathable world itself. Unlike most viruses or bacteria, this organism didn't wait. Once inhaled, it targeted the heart with pinpoint precision, triggering an immediate and irreversible cardiac arrest by neuro-electric hijack. A person could be walking mid-stride, even smiling, and the next moment, their body would crumple to the ground like a dropped marionette. The global spread began at 10:47 a.m. Tokyo time. By 11:02 a.m., the first confirmed clusters were reported. Too late to act. By 11:06, those who had sent the warnings were themselves gone. Military command centers, medical research facilities, world governments. Every human system designed to respond to crisis was instantly paralyzed by the one thing it couldn't account for: total simultaneity. There was no patient zero to isolate. No emergency alert that could be issued. No time to organize a response or even realize what was happening. Some tried. In Norway, a research technician sealed herself in a biohazard chamber after seeing 3 of her colleagues fall in front of her. She ran to a sealed communication terminal, typed out airborne cardiac virus into a report line, and then fell face first into the monitor. Dead before the message could send. In Washington, D.C., a general attempted to scramble jets to investigate what he thought was a coordinated bioterror attack. He died mid-command. In India, a schoolteacher rushed to evacuate her class after noticing students slumping over their desks. Her last act of humanity was opening the door to the hallway, allowing the pathogen to sweep through the entire building in under 5 minutes. In every country, in every language, the pattern was the same. Confusion, realization, collapse, silence. There were no resistance groups, no lone survivors, no end of the world vloggers documenting the chaos in real time. Because this wasn't chaos, it was precision. There's a word for this kind of extinction. Clean, no fire, no screaming, no blood. Just absence. A clinical erasure of the human species, as if we'd all been edited out of the world in one silent keystroke. And while humans disappeared in mere minutes, the world itself remained untouched. Planes continued to taxi until their autopilot ran out. Elevators opened 2 floors no one would step onto. Coffee machines finished their brew cycles, pouring hot drinks for the dead. Dogs barked in apartments. Cats pawed at now unmoving hands. Car alarms rang through city streets that no longer needed traffic lights. There was no end of the world broadcast. No farewell message, no memory of our final words, because no one had time to speak them. Next, we witnessed the collapse not in moments, but in seconds. Let's zoom out and see how the entire species fell instantly. Across the planet, it happened in unison. One moment, humanity was in motion, commuting, conversing, creating. The next, it was gone. There was no transition, no slow fade, no screaming, no riots, no mass panic. Instead, the end came with almost surreal quiet. In Snow Paulo, a woman was handing her child a juice box when they both slumped forward at the same time. Mother and son, side by side, hearts frozen. In Moscow, a traffic jam on the Garden Ring froze in place. Cars drifted gently forward or into curbs as drivers' lifeless bodies slumped over steering wheels, horns blaring into the void. In Lagos, people fell mid-dance at a wedding, smiles frozen on their faces, the music playing for no one. In New York, surgeons dropped where they stood, scalpels clattering to the floor of silent operating rooms. Time didn't slow. People just vanished from the equation of movement. An estimated 8 billion deaths occurred within 5 minutes, and nearly all within the first 60 seconds of exposure. The pathogen moved faster than any known force in human history, not because of speed, but because of synchronicity. It didn't travel linearly. It activated globally, using the interconnected air systems, jet streams, and industrial ventilation infrastructures that humanity had so efficiently built. Every subway system, every skyscraper, HVAC, every airplane cabin, every underground tunnel, movie theater, shopping mall, every breath was a loaded trigger. Imagine a drone camera floating over Paris. The Eiffel Tower still stands tall. Street vendors' stands are still fully stocked. Bicycles lie beside their riders on cobbled alleys. A tourist's phone continues streaming a video to the cloud with no one left to upload another. The city is still. Now zoom to Cape Town, to Beijing, to Chicago, 2 tiny rural villages in the Amazon. Even there, among the most isolated, death arrived, carried by the winds. The biological agent was unlike anything humanity had encountered. Not just for its lethality, but for its consistency. No immunity, no carriers, no variations. It didn't mutate. It didn't evolve. It didn't need to. It was the final version of itself, a perfect killer. The result was a kind of global autopsy frozen in time. In homes, dinner tables were set. In airports, luggage continued cycling on conveyor belts as bodies lay in disarray. In schools, pencils rested on mid-written sentences. In factories, robotic arms continued their tasks, unaware their operators were gone. Everything was left running until power loss would eventually reclaim the world. But that moment hadn't come yet. In these early hours, the world was still vibrant. It just had no audience. Cameras continued recording. Satellites still transmitted. Even social media saw a brief, eerie spike in uploads. Videos where people recording their pets or themselves suddenly collapsed mid-frame. Some footage captured real-time death, a live streamer in Seoul joking about conspiracy theories. Mid-sentence, gone. A child playing a piano recital via Zoom. the final note held long by her finger, even after she slumped sideways. A classroom full of students writing an exam, one by one tipping forward in chilling silence, like dominoes made of flesh and dreams. There were no farewell phone calls, no mass messages of love or goodbye, because there was no buildup, no sense of something going wrong, no chance to understand. The human species did not fall to war. It did not fall to famine, or fire, or flood. It fell to a single breath, drawn in 1,000 cities at 1 billion moments, by every living person who had no idea it would be their last. The few automated systems with artificial intelligence registered anomalies. Medical monitoring platforms, smart homes, and defense satellites sent silent alerts into an empty void. But there was no one left to receive them. In the Vatican, the bells never tolled. In Mecca, the faithful never finished their prayer. In Times Square, the screens kept playing ads for products no one would buy again. The Earth had turned the page, but the story was over. The eerie part wasn't the silence. It was the stillness. No voices, no footsteps, no friction. Just the persistent hum of machines and the distant cry of animals who would soon notice their feeders were gone. There was no time for mourning, no grief, no realization. Only the total absence of awareness, a flicking of the switch on consciousness itself. From the highest executive to the humblest child, from prison cells to palaces, death had been democratic. But what happens to a planet when everything built by humans keeps running, without humans? Let's explore the fragile systems we left behind and how they begin to unravel. For the first few hours after the fall of humanity, the Earth didn't notice. The skies remained blue. Rivers continued to flow. The clouds drifted over empty cities like nothing had happened. But below, the lights were still on. Power plants across the world were still functioning, at least temporarily. Nuclear stations maintained their cooling cycles on automated sequences. Coal and gas plants kept pushing electricity into grids designed for demand that no longer existed. Hydroelectric dams spun turbines for homes that would never turn on a light again. Skyscrapers glowed through the night, entire cityscapes bathed in artificial luminescence, like monuments to a species that had just vanished. Streetlights still flicked on at dusk. Refrigerators hummed in kitchens next to lifeless bodies. Computers stayed logged in. Office printers jammed mid-task. Robots on factory floors assembled products with no destination. But everything had an expiration point. Within 48 to 72 hours, systems began failing. Electricity grids, no longer maintained by technicians, overloaded or shut down as small fires in control centers went unchecked. Water treatment facilities stopped processing. Tap water slowly turned stagnant and then foul. Data centers, while engineered for stability, began overheating as air conditioning systems failed. Nuclear power plants, if not automatically, scrammed, entered critical failure zones. Emergency systems activated, but with no human oversight, some began to degrade. In a world of total human absence, automation was a ticking clock. Drones still patrolled perimeters. Roombas still vacuumed blood, stained floors. Self-driving delivery bots navigated empty sidewalks until their batteries died quietly in gutters. In airports, planes kept arriving on autopilot, landing with ghost precision only to sit idle on runways. No gate agents left to guide them in. Some aircraft crashed mid-landing, pilotless or caught in confusion. Others circled endlessly until they ran out of fuel and fell from the sky. Air traffic control centers were empty. Skies darkened with the smoke of downed jets. Hospitals were the most chilling of all. Life support systems continued to operate for hours. But with no one to refill oxygen tanks, check IVs, or respond to alarms, machines eventually failed. The few patients already unconscious when the event occurred simply drifted deeper into stillness. Autopsy tables remained cold. Morgues began to fill with the backlog of natural death that would no longer be recorded. Smart homes, the pinnacle of convenience, continued doing what they were programmed to do. Blinds opened with the sunrise. Thermostats adjusted to comfort. Ovens turned off timers. Security systems alerted their owners who no longer existed. For days, the illusion of continuity remained. The internet still worked, for a time. Servers pinged each other. Websites remained online. Even notifications kept popping up. Messages sent during the last moments before death were delivered and marked as read, automatically. Social media profiles still showed online thanks to background processes and smart devices. Digital ghosts lingered. But without human input, even the most robust systems began to decay. Software updates failed to deploy. Systems crashed and never rebooted. One by one, websites blinked out of existence. Databases corrupted. Passwords expired. Banks continued to accrue interest. Stock markets closed with no bell to ring. Cryptocurrency algorithms mined digital coins into wallets no one would ever open. Human civilization had always been held together by threads of maintenance, attention, and care. Now those threads unraveled in silence. Within a week, the world's great cities began their quiet descent. Subway trains halted in tunnels, passengers still sitting where they died. Elevators hung between floors, doors never to open again. Traffic lights blinked uselessly at intersections lined with abandoned vehicles. Digital billboards displayed countdowns, ads, or weather alerts for a public that no longer watched. Even in rural areas, the collapse was thorough. Farms depended on automated irrigation, harvesting drones, and scheduled pesticide dispersion. These systems began failing, too. Crops withered. Livestock, unfed and uncared for, grew weak or escaped. Barn doors swung open in the wind. Everywhere, the sound of machinery outliving its purpose filled the empty air. Satellites, still orbiting Earth, continued to beam down data, but the signals fell into deaf ears. Surveillance satellites watched cities burn from malfunctioning energy systems or natural disasters no longer addressed. They recorded it all, but no one would ever review the footage. In Antarctica, research outposts became tombs of knowledge, frozen in their last transmissions. In space, the International Space Station continued circling the Earth. Inside, the astronauts had died as swiftly as anyone else, their bodies now floating in silence, tools still drifting near their hands. Eventually, battery life failed. Systems shut down, and the lights began going out for good. The Earth entered its first night since the rise of civilization, with no one left to dream. But as the machines fall silent, something else begins to awaken: nature. Let's explore what happens when Earth reclaims what was once ours. At first, the natural world paused. Not in mourning, because nature doesn't mourn, but in stillness, sensing something vast had shifted. In forests near cities, birds continued singing, unaware that traffic noise would never return. In suburban backyards, squirrels darted between trees, cautious only of predators that no longer needed to worry about cars or kids. But by the third day, the change became undeniable. Deer wandered into abandoned towns. Wolves crossed highways, unconcerned. Bears rummaged through grocery stores whose sliding doors still opened automatically. Street dogs, once reliant on humans, began forming packs, returning to ancestral instincts. Zoo enclosures still held animals, but without feedings, their hunger grew. In time, some would escape. Others would die caged, waiting for caretakers who never came. Domesticated pets fared worse. Dogs sat faithfully beside owners long gone. Cats prowled empty apartments, confused by the stillness. Aquarium filters kept running for a few more days until power faded and tanks turned stagnant. Parrots, still alive, mimicked the last voices they'd heard in eerie, empty rooms. The human presence, so loud, so constant, was gone. And Earth breathed differently. Within weeks, vegetation began its quiet conquest. Lawns overgrew into tangled wilds. Ivy crept up the sides of once immaculate homes. Cracks in pavements split wider as roots sought freedom. Nature, long pushed back by concrete and steel, began its return. In cities, trees grew through car windows. Vines coiled around stairwells. Urban parks exploded in color, no longer trimmed or pruned. Crops on untended farms sprouted, went to seed, and rejoined the soil. Rats flourished in the immediate aftermath, thriving in a buffet of abandoned food. So did insects, whose numbers ballooned with no pest control. But soon, predator populations adjusted. A new balance formed, not engineered, not curated, but primal. Without pollution from traffic, the skies cleared rapidly. Within a month, air quality improved globally. The stars at night burned brighter than any living human had ever seen, yet no one looked up. Marine life benefited even faster. Fishing boats sat motionless at docks. Oil rigs went dark. Noise pollution underwater faded. Whales began traveling through shipping lanes without fear. Coral reefs began regenerating. Coastal areas, long littered with human debris, began to cleanse. Seabirds nested in beach resorts. Dolphins leaped in empty harbors. With no aircraft, the skies belonged again to birds and clouds. Flight paths faded. The contrails vanished. Airports became havens for nesting, grassland, and silence. But not all changes were tranquil. Without human maintenance, disasters accumulated. Fires sparked by faulty wiring or natural causes burned unchecked. Floods reclaimed riverbanks once held by man-made levees. Dams cracked and burst. Chemical plants leaked. Toxic waste from factories seeped into groundwater. Nuclear meltdowns, though initially delayed, eventually occurred in multiple facilities. The Earth wasn't healing in a perfect utopian arc. It was resetting violently in places, slowly in others, rebalancing on its own terms. Yet through it all, one truth lingered. There were no eyes left to see. No cameras watched the slow blooming of life where there was once industry. No pens recorded the poetic silence of Times Square overgrown with moss. No one captured the ghostly beauty of a lion walking through a London tube station. No sentient witness remained to document this rewilding of the world. Nature didn't need us to continue. But our absence meant that meaning, at least, in the human sense, had vanished too. The monuments we built endured, for now. The Great Wall began to crumble under encroaching roots. The pyramids remained standing, yet sand slowly reclaimed the edges. Mount Rushmore stared out into empty plains, unobserved. Even the most iconic structures, Eiffel Tower, Burj Khalifa, Statue of Liberty, stood firm against the first years of decay. But without care, rust would come. Cracks would deepen. Eventually, they too would fall. Time, once measured by human calendars, now stretched undefined. In 100 years, the wild would reign. Cities would be swallowed by trees. Roads would dissolve into undergrowth. Satellites in orbit would begin to fail, falling like metal rain. Books would rot. Screens would fade. Memory itself, everything we ever were, would be gone. Perhaps in 10,000 years, all that remained would be relics buried beneath forests, ice, or sand. Fossils of steel. Digital shards in hardened drives. Maybe a preserved room somewhere, sealed tightly with children's toys still arranged in play, and still no one to interpret them. The Earth continued spinning, warmed by a sun that had never cared. The winds blew through glassless windows. The tides ebbed and flowed. The seasons turned. This was no apocalypse. It was not destruction. It was absence. The sound of the world unwatched. But even in extinction, something remains. Let's examine the legacy of humanity, what we left behind, and who or what might one day find it. Long after the last heartbeat, humanity's fingerprints lingered. Not in the way we imagined, not in celebrations or monuments, but in what we abandoned. Civilization had ended, but its skeleton remained. Steel and glass cities, satellites in orbit, deep data vaults beneath mountains, and echoes stored in the cloud. This was our unintentional time capsule. A planet-wide museum with no curators. In underground bunkers untouched by surface decay, servers continued to hum for years. Powered by solar fields or geothermal systems running until the smallest failure caused total shutdown. Some contained entire libraries of human knowledge, encyclopedias, blueprints, languages, history, art, in theory. Everything we knew could survive in these sealed digital vaults. In reality, without caretakers, corruption was inevitable. Data rot, mechanical failure, magnetic degradation. Within a few decades, hard drives began to fail. Files once meant to preserve the sum of human culture, lost in code errors and eroded metals. Even the most advanced archives, such as DNA, encoded information, or optical quartz storage, faced an ironic vulnerability. They were built to last for millennia, but only if someone preserved context. The data might survive. The instructions on how to interpret it, less certain. To an outside intelligence or a distant future species, these relics would be unreadable without a Rosetta Stone we never thought to provide. Still, some things could endure. The Voyager probes, humanity's oldest ambassadors, continued drifting through interstellar space. Each carried a golden record, greetings in dozens of human languages, music, pictures, mathematical symbols. A message to the stars, launched with hope, now rendered tragically obsolete. And then, there were the cities. Centuries later, their skeletal forms might still stand, at least partially. Skyscrapers tilted under the weight of rust and vegetation. Metro tunnels collapsed and flooded. Highways overtaken by moss and roots, their painted lines barely visible under dirt and rain. The further one traveled from coastal zones, the more might be preserved. In dry deserts, like the American Southwest or Central Australia, structures could fossilize in place. Plastic artifacts might last tens of thousands of years. Glass might persist for hundreds of thousands. Nuclear waste, buried deep and marked with warnings in languages no longer spoken, could emit danger signals for 1,000,000 years. But all these remnants, fragmented, scattered, stripped of context, would be mysteries to any who found them. What story would they tell? Would future intelligent life conclude we were gods? Or fools? Would they see our ruins as warnings or invitations? And if aliens ever arrived, drawn by distant radio signals that eventually went silent, what would they find? Perhaps they descend upon a planet rich with biodiversity, strangely urbanized, yet eerily untouched. They'd analyze buildings, decode architecture, reverse engineer machinery. But without people, the soul of what we were would elude them. No one left to explain love, war, hunger, sacrifice, joy, shame, or hope. Humanity had dreamed of legacy. We built time capsules, wrote novels, recorded videos, carved monuments into stone. But in the end, those efforts were self-referential, crafted by the living. For the future, we thought we'd inhabit ourselves. We never prepared for total, unrecoverable silence. Even in nature, evidence of us remained. Introduced species spread without us. Genetically modified crops persisted, mutating under new pressures. Microplastics embedded in the oceans and ice sheets marked the Anthropocene-like fingerprints on a mirror. Our reach had been vast, our impact undeniable, but intent, that had died with us. The echoes of our existence would ripple for millennia, but grow fainter with each passing century. In 100,000 years, Earth might look like it did before we rose. In 1,000,000 years, the only trace of us could be a thin layer in the geological record, a stratum of artificial elements. Melted glass, radiation, and bone fragments. To the Earth, we had been an event. a blip, a brief period of intense change. A clever species that raced to build a tower toward the stars, only to vanish before seeing the view. It's humbling, not because we were small, but because we were alone in our awareness of it. The only ones who asked, what if we disappear? And then one day, we did. Our legacy isn't just what we built. It's what we meant to each other, what we dreamed, what we feared, and what we left behind, unintentionally or otherwise. And now, that meaning belongs to no one. But could such a scenario really happen? Is a pathogen capable of instantaneous, global, 100% lethality even scientifically possible? Let's explore the edge of real-world biology and terrifying plausibility. A pathogen that kills every human on Earth within minutes, instantly, silently, without exception. It sounds like science fiction, and for the most part, it is. But how close could we really get? Let's break this down. To achieve total global human extinction in minutes, a pathogen would need several key features. Airborne transmission, to spread without contact. Instant lethality, to kill within seconds. 100% infection rate, no immunity or resistance. Global synchronization, to affect all regions simultaneously. No warning signs, to avoid containment or mitigation. Now, let's compare that to what we know in real-world science. Airborne transmission. Plausible many pathogens are airborne. Influenza, tuberculosis, COVID-19, and even anthrax spores can travel through the air. With the right environmental conditions, humidity, temperature, and closed space, airborne diseases can spread extremely efficiently. However, truly global airborne spread within minutes is much more difficult. The atmosphere doesn't mix uniformly in real time. Global wind patterns are complex and uneven. Even the most contagious viruses, like measles, take days or weeks to spread, unless there's simultaneous release. If this hypothetical pathogen were deployed via multiple synchronized dispersal events, such as in airports, industrial fans, HVAC systems, or jet streams, global coverage becomes more feasible. This could happen by accident in a hyper-connected world, or by design. Instant lethality. Unprecedented here's where things get speculative. Most known viruses and bacteria take hours to days to cause death, often by triggering immune responses, organ failure, or secondary infections. Even bioweapons like anthrax or Ebola are not instantaneous. But what if this wasn't a traditional pathogen? What if it directly targeted the nervous system or cardiovascular function? Some natural toxins, like tetrodotoxin from pufferfish or botulinum toxin, can cause paralysis or cardiac arrest rapidly. Nerve agents like VX gas or serine can kill within minutes by disrupting neurotransmitter function. A bioengineered airborne neuroagent, designed to block cardiac signals or hijack neural pathways controlling the heart, could theoretically kill within seconds. Unlikely? Yes. Impossible? No. 100% infection rate. Nearly impossible. No real-world pathogen has ever achieved universal infection or death. Even the Black Death, history's deadliest pandemic, killed about 30–60% of Europe's population. The 1918 flu and COVID-19 spread globally, but with survivability. A 100% fatal, 100% contagious disease would likely burn out before reaching everyone, because the host would die too quickly to transmit it further. That's why hyperlethal viruses like Ebola tend to self-limit. However, if the agent was aerosolized and synchronized, rather than reliant on human hosts to spread, it could bypass this limitation. Imagine an engineered particle that doesn't replicate, but activates on inhalation like inhaling carbon monoxide, but with a neuro-lethal payload. It's still incredibly speculative, but in the realm of advanced bioweapons research or alien design, conceivable global synchronization requires design. No natural virus could pull this off without help. Even the fastest spreading diseases still rely on human movement and chain infection. To have the entire globe infected within the same 10-minute window, you'd need either coordinated deployment systems, self-replicating aerosol nanotech, or some kind of triggered atmospheric distribution mechanism, possibly piggybacking on global weather systems, satellites, or even jet exhaust lines. It's logistically nightmarish. But if the intent was extinction and the actor had the technology, it's not off the table. Some theorists even imagine cosmic origins, a fast-acting spaceborne pathogen, arriving via meteorite or solar radiation, triggered mutation that bypasses Earth's immune ecology entirely. Science fiction, yes. But not without some eerie precedent, the Tunguska event, or more recently, the discovery of viable viruses in ancient permafrost raises real concerns about unknown biological threats. No warning signs. The final edge, what makes our scenario so terrifying, is that no one knew. No symptoms. No spread curve. No red flags. Some real-world agents behave similarly. Carbon monoxide is odorless, tasteless, and lethal. Hydrogen sulfide, in certain concentrations, can cause immediate unconsciousness and death. Even radiation exposure can be asymptomatic until it's too late, but none of them are viral or infectious. To make a virus behave like a stealth neurotoxin, especially with no immune response or resistance, that would require manipulation far beyond current bioengineering capabilities. It would likely need to be engineered, either by advanced post-human AI, malicious alien intelligence, or a future civilization that decided life on Earth had run its course. Conclusion: not impossible, but improbable in nature. Life balances between spread and severity. The more deadly something is, the less chance it has to propagate. But in a designed extinction event, that equation doesn't matter. It's a targeted purpose. Built bioweapon using airborne neuroshock mechanics or aerosolized instant toxins could, under the right conditions, simulate this scenario. It would be the last invention humanity ever made, or perhaps not made by humanity at all. So with every human gone, every system shut down, and the Earth falling silent, only one question remains. What does this story mean? Let's end by reflecting on our fragility and what this haunting scenario says about who we are. In the end, it wasn't fire or war or famine that took us. It was silence. One breath, drawn without suspicion, then nothing. The world didn't end in chaos. It ended in precision. No struggle, no last-minute redemption arc. Just the quiet and total vanishing of a species that once imagined itself eternal. Humanity had spent millennia climbing toward the stars, inventing language, mapping the genome, splitting atoms, writing poetry. But we had always been fragile, held together not by strength, but by connection. Connection to each other, to knowledge, to care, to time. This scenario, a global synchronized extinction, is fictional, but the message is real. We are not as invincible as we think. Our systems, our networks, even our memories are delicate, vulnerable to forces beyond our control. And maybe that's the part worth holding on to. Not the fear of what could end us, but the reminder of what makes us human in the first place. We build, we remember, we dream, we hope. The silence that would follow such an event isn't just the absence of noise, it's the absence of meaning. Because meaning doesn't exist in ruins or machines. It lives in stories, in memory, in us. So if you're watching this, if you've made it this far, pause for just a second. Breathe in. That breath is something a world like this will never take again. If this story left an impression or made you reflect, then here's how you can help keep this project alive. If you want to keep exploring haunting, mind-bending, or terrifying alternate realities like this one, subscribe to the channel, like the video to let the algorithm know you want more. Comment below, what would you want to be remembered for if humanity vanished tomorrow? Every view, every interaction helps this channel grow. And in a world where stories are all we leave behind, thank you for being part of this one.